On an autumn afternoon, the restaurant Old Town Grill, in the suburbs of Chicago, was bustling with weekend activity. Rachel Miller moved from table to table with practiced ease, taking orders with a smile. She had been working at this restaurant for 5 years, ever since her divorce. She tried not to let her fatigue show on her face, but sometimes when she caught sight of herself in the mirror, she could feel the weight of life etched in the fine lines around her eyes. When work ended, Rachel hurried to pick up her son. Ethan had just turned 10 and was a boy who seemed mature beyond his years. He understood that his mother was working alone and was a gentle child who never made unreasonable demands. When she spotted her son waiting at the school gate, warmth spread through Rachel's heart. For this child, she felt she could face any hardship. "Good job today, Mom." Ethan took his mother's hand and squeezed it gently with his small fingers. "Thank you, Ethan. How was school today?" "Really good. I got a perfect score on my math test." Rachel felt proud of her son. Even in their financially difficult situation, Ethan consistently maintained excellent grades. His intelligence and sharp observation skills sometimes surprised adults. That evening, while preparing dinner in their small apartment kitchen, the phone rang. Looking at the caller ID, Rachel's expression clouded. It was a call from her mother, Margaret. "Rachel? I need to talk to you about Sophia's wedding." Margaret lived in an upscale neighborhood in Chicago. Her husband Robert was a successful accountant, and the family lived an upper-class lifestyle. For Margaret, her divorced eldest daughter was always a source of headaches. "What is it, Mother?" "You're supposed to come, but please don't dress inappropriately. The relatives will be there too." Rachel's grip tightened on the phone receiver. Her mother always considered her current situation shameful. 5 years ago, when her husband's affair was discovered and she divorced, her parents said she should have tried harder. Instead of supporting their daughter who was desperately working as a single mother, they were constantly critical. "I'll dress appropriately. And tell Ethan to be quiet. I don't want children's noise ruining the ceremony." After hanging up, Rachel sighed deeply. Her father Robert was a kind man, but he rarely went against his wife's opinions. He often sacrificed his eldest daughter's position to maintain peace in the household. Meanwhile, her sister Sophia was the family's pride. After graduating from a prestigious university, she got a job at a major bank and was set to marry an executive candidate from the same bank. Her parents constantly used Sophia as a point of comparison, criticizing Rachel's choices. "Look at Sophia. She makes the right choices." This was Margaret's constant refrain. The next day, during her break at the restaurant, Sophia called. "Sister, about the wedding, could you try not to stand out too much? It's my special day." "Of course, Sophia. Congratulations. And tell Ethan too. Make sure he doesn't make a fuss. Michael's family will be there, and I don't want to make a bad impression." Sophia's voice carried a hint of contempt for her sister. She had grown up receiving her parents' affection since childhood and thought it natural to look down on her sister. Rachel's divorce was nothing but family shame to Sophia. After hanging up, Rachel thought about Ethan. Her son sensitively picked up on his grandparents' and aunts' attitudes. Sometimes she would see him quietly listening to adult conversations. His sharp observation skills showed that he understood the family's complex relationships. That night, while doing his homework, Ethan said to his mother, "Mom, don't Grandma and Grandpa like us?" Rachel's heart ached at her son's question. Children understood much more than adults thought. "That's not true, Ethan. Family is family." But those words rang hollow. Rachel herself rarely felt love from her family anymore. She had a premonition that Sophia's wedding would be another scene of humiliation. Still, she had to attend as a family member. For her son's sake too, she had to be strong. 3 weeks before Sophia's wedding, on a Tuesday morning, a formal invitation arrived at Rachel's place. The invitation, printed with gold letters on thick ivory paper, was clearly expensive. When she opened the envelope, a small note fell out. Written in Sophia's handwriting, "Dress code is formal. Don't you dare come in cheap clothes." Rachel stared at the invitation with mixed feelings. While she genuinely wanted to celebrate her sister's happiness, she was hurt by how her family treated her. When Ethan came home from school, his eyes lit up at the beautiful invitation in his mother's hands. "Wow, what a pretty invitation, Mom. I'm looking forward to Aunt Sophia's wedding." "Yes, Ethan. But we need to dress formally, so let's go buy new clothes." Over the weekend, Rachel decided to purchase clothes for her son and herself from her limited savings. At the department store, she chose a small suit for Ethan and found a modest but elegant navy dress for herself. While not expensive, the cost of both outfits equaled her week's salary. When the saleswoman complimented them saying, "You both look lovely," Rachel felt beautiful for the first time in a long while. Ethan also posed proudly in front of the mirror in his new suit. "Mom, we're going to look wonderful." "Yes, Ethan. We'll attend the ceremony with our heads held high." However, that night, Sophia called. "Sister, I heard you went shopping. You're not planning to come to my wedding in some cheap dress, are you?" Rachel was speechless on the phone. She didn't know who had told Sophia about the shopping trip, but it was likely their mother. "I chose appropriate attire, Sophia. Your idea of appropriate and my idea of appropriate are different. Michael's family are people of high social standing. Don't embarrass me." After hanging up, Rachel stared at the new dress she had bought. The beautiful dress that the saleswoman had complimented suddenly seemed to lose its luster. A week before the wedding, there was a family gathering at her parents' house. Rachel and Ethan were invited to dinner. Her parents' house in Chicago's upscale neighborhood was a stark contrast to Rachel's small apartment. The spacious entrance hall was decorated with awards and photos that told the story of her father's success. When they entered the living room where relatives were gathered, the conversation stopped for a moment. Uncle Tom was the first to speak. "Hey, Rachel. How are you doing?" "Fine, thank you, Uncle. So this is little Ethan. You've grown so much." Cousin Jennifer said in an artificially bright voice, "Rachel, how's work? Are you still working at the restaurant?" "Yes, it's very fulfilling." At that moment, Margaret said loudly, "Everyone, let me introduce our waitress daughter. Rachel works at a local restaurant. She's very good at carrying plates." The relatives laughed awkwardly. Rachel's face reddened with humiliation. Ethan squeezed his mother's hand tightly and quietly looked around at the adults' faces. "Mom's job is a very important job," Ethan said in a small voice. "Yes, Ethan. Every job is important," Aunt Caroline smiled kindly. During dinner, the conversation was dominated by talk of Sophia's wedding. Michael's family's social status, the grandeur of the wedding venue, the location of their new home, everything was discussed with pride. Rachel listened silently, but occasionally when she looked at Ethan, she noticed her son listening carefully to the adults' conversations. After the meal, while the children played in another room, the adults had coffee in the living room. Rachel was helping wash dishes in the kitchen when she happened to overhear her parents' and relatives' conversation. "I feel sorry for Rachel, but I don't want Sophia to be spoken badly of because of the divorce," came her father Robert's voice. "That's right. I'm worried that Rachel's presence might affect Sophia's marriage," Margaret agreed. "But she's family, so there's nothing we can do," Aunt Caroline said. "Because we're family, we all need to support each other," Uncle Tom joined in. However, Cousin Jennifer had a different opinion. "But Rachel's choices are her own responsibility, aren't they? Why should Sophia have to suffer for it?" Rachel stopped washing dishes. She could painfully see that even her family treated her as a burden. At that moment, Ethan came into the kitchen. "Mom, I'll help too." "Thank you, Ethan. But I'm almost done, so it's okay." As mother and son were about to leave the kitchen, Ethan suddenly stopped. Voices from the living room could be heard in the hallway. "Don't tell Sophia until after she's married," came Grandfather Robert's low voice. "But she'll find out eventually, won't she?" Grandmother Margaret said worriedly. "When that time comes, we'll deal with it then. Right now, let's prioritize her happiness." Ethan took his mother's hand and led her away from that spot. However, his grandparents' words remained in his head. It was clear there was some important secret. But Ethan didn't say anything to his mother. He understood that the adult world had complicated circumstances. In the car on the way home, Rachel said to Ethan, "Today was a long day. You must be tired. It was good to see everyone." "Yes, but Mom, I'm on your side." Rachel's heart warmed at her son's words. In the midst of feeling no support from her family, this small son was her only true ally. The day before the wedding, Rachel stood in front of the mirror wearing her new dress. The simple but elegant dress enhanced her beauty. Ethan also wore his new suit and looked like a little gentleman. "Mom, you look beautiful." "Thank you, Ethan. Tomorrow we'll attend the ceremony with our heads held high." However, that night, Rachel couldn't sleep. Thinking about the cold stares from her family, her sister's contempt, and the new humiliation that would likely occur tomorrow made her chest ache. Still, she had to be strong for her son. Meanwhile, Ethan also couldn't sleep. His grandparents' secret conversation wouldn't leave his mind. He intuitively felt that the secret would have a major impact on family relationships. However, as a 10-year-old boy, he couldn't fully understand the importance of that secret. On the morning of the wedding, Chicago's sky was cloudy. Rachel dressed in her navy dress and Ethan in his new suit as they headed to the ceremony venue. The venue was the famous luxury hotel Grand Hyatt Chicago, in the city, a magnificent place befitting Sophia and Michael's wedding. Stepping into the hotel lobby, Rachel felt a bit anxious about their clothing. The other guests were clearly dressed in expensive outfits and wearing jewelry. However, when Ethan squeezed his mother's hand and whispered, "Mom, we look wonderful," Rachel regained her courage. When they gave their names at the reception, the staff checked the seating chart and guided them. Entering the large ballroom, Rachel gasped. Gorgeous chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and tables beautifully decorated with white roses and orchids were arranged throughout. However, when they found their seats, the color drained from Rachel's face. Other tables had elegant place cards reading, "Miller family relatives," "Michael's family relatives," "college friends," but her and Ethan's seats had "single mother waitress" written in large letters. Moreover, their seats were in the very back corner of the venue, almost invisible to anyone. Ethan also saw the place card and frowned. "Mom, this is terrible." "It's okay, Ethan. Let's just stay quiet." Rachel pulled out her chair with trembling hands and sat down. She could hear relatives around them whispering as they looked at their place card. She felt suffocated with embarrassment, but she had to show strength in front of her son. When the ceremony began, Sophia appeared in a pure white dress, looking as beautiful as an angel. The sight of her father Robert taking his daughter's arm and walking to the altar was moving. Rachel wanted to genuinely celebrate her sister's happiness, but her heart was disturbed by the earlier humiliation. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, it was time for the host to introduce the family. Rachel tensed up. "Let me introduce the bride's family. Father Robert Miller, Mother Margaret Miller." Amid the applause, her parents stood up and bowed slightly. "And the bride's sister." The host showed a momentary expression of confusion. "Rachel and her son Ethan." Amid sparse applause, Rachel embarrassedly stood up. But at that moment, Margaret stood up and took the microphone from the host. "Everyone, thank you for coming to our daughter Sophia's wedding tonight." The venue fell silent. Margaret continued with a smile. "Actually, tonight we have special service. Our eldest daughter Rachel will bring drinks to everyone. She's a professional waitress, so please don't hesitate to call on her." Laughter echoed through the venue. Rachel remained seated, unable to move. She wondered if this was a nightmare. Rachel, stand up. The guests are waiting, Margaret said loudly. The relatives around them began laughing too. Cousin Jennifer clapped her hands saying, "What a wonderful idea, Aunt Margaret." Sophia also took the microphone. "Sister, please take care of us tonight. First, please bring champagne to the groom's table." Michael's family looked confused, but some guests seemed amused. Rachel couldn't stand up or continue sitting, she was simply frozen. Tears began streaming down her cheeks. She had been treated coldly by her family before, but had never been so publicly humiliated. In front of her son, in front of a crowd of people, her dignity was being trampled. "Mom," Ethan called in a small voice. Rachel looked at her son. Anger dwelt in Ethan's eyes. He understood the adult's cruelty and was trying to protect his mother. "Oh, will little Ethan help too?" Margaret dealt another blow. "Please help your mother carry the plates." The laughter in the venue grew louder. Even Uncle Tom, one of their relatives, was smiling wryly. No one spoke up to defend Rachel. At that moment, Ethan quietly stood up. The 10-year-old boy straightened his back and looked around the venue. From his small body came a dignity that didn't match his age. Rachel tried to stop her son, but Ethan had already begun walking. He moved toward the center of the venue with firm steps. Walking up to the microphone where the host stood, Ethan turned around and surveyed the venue. The laughter gradually subsided as people watched with interest to see what would happen. "Excuse me," Ethan said. The host, confused, lowered the microphone in front of the boy. "I'm Ethan Miller. I came today to celebrate Aunt Sophia's wedding." The venue fell completely silent. Sophia and Michael at the bride and groom's table were also tense, not knowing what would happen. "I have a present for the bride," Ethan continued in a clear voice. "I'm going to tell the truth." The color drained from Margaret and Robert's faces. They felt an ominous premonition. Grandpa and Grandma were talking about something last night. Robert tried to stand up, but his legs were too weak to move. They said they wouldn't tell Aunt Sophia until after she got married. Murmuring arose in the venue. Sophia looked anxiously at Ethan. "But I think it's better to know the truth." Ethan took out a small smartphone. It was something he had found in his grandparents' study the night before. "This is a photo of important documents about Aunt Sophia." "Ethan, stop it," Margaret said in a trembling voice, but it was already too late. The wedding guests watched Ethan with bated breath. Groom Michael looked at Sophia with a confused expression, and Sophia stood frozen with a pale face. "Grandpa and Grandma talked in the study last night," Ethan continued calmly. "They said, once Sophia gets married, she won't need to know this secret." Robert tried to stand up, but his legs were shaking and he couldn't move. The secret he had guarded for 30 years was about to be exposed by his grandson. "But I think Aunt Sophia has the right to know." Ethan pointed his smartphone screen toward the venue. There, a photo of an old DNA test report was displayed. "This is a test report from 30 years ago. It was made when Aunt Sophia was born." The results were clear. There is no blood relationship between Grandpa Robert and Aunt Sophia. The venue began to murmur. Sophia covered her mouth with her hand, showing an expression of disbelief. "That's a lie. That can't be true." Sophia screamed. However, Ethan continued. "That's not all. I also found Grandma's old diary. It had the real father's name written in it." Margaret collapsed into her chair and covered her face with both hands. The affair from 30 years ago that she had desperately tried to hide was finally about to come to light. The real father is a man named Richard Harrison. He was Grandma's boss at the company where she worked when she was young. An elderly man stood up from the groom's side. "It was Michael's father." "Richard Harrison? You don't mean the founder of Harrison Investments?" Ethan nodded. That's right. But that person has already passed away. He died of a heart attack 10 years ago. Sophia stood stunned. Her identity was about to be overturned from its foundations. The fact that there was no blood relationship with Robert, whom she had thought of as her beloved father, was unacceptable to her. This is a lie. Ethan, why are you doing something so cruel? But at that moment, Robert opened his heavy mouth. Sophia, sit down. His voice was filled with deep fatigue and resignation. What Ethan is saying is the truth. Shock ran through the venue. Robert himself had acknowledged the facts. 30 years ago, I knew that Margaret had a relationship with Richard. But I loved her, and I loved you too. Whether we're blood related or not, you are my daughter. Margaret stood up crying. Robert, I'm sorry. I was young and foolish. But I've never regretted marrying you, not once. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know? Sophia asked tearfully. I wanted to protect your happiness. Robert loved you like his real daughter. I thought blood relationships didn't matter. Groom Michael approached Sophia in confusion. Sophia, what does this mean? I don't know either. Sophia screamed. Everything I believed was all a lie. The wedding guests felt like they were watching a drama. But this was happening in reality. The glamorous wedding reception had turned into a venue for exposing family secrets. Ethan had one more important piece of information. Also, Mr. Richard Harrison had a huge inheritance. But Aunt Sophia wasn't told that she had inheritance rights. Now the groom's family began murmuring. Harrison Investments was a famous major corporation in the industry. If it was revealed that she was the founder's illegitimate child, there was a possibility that considerable inheritance would come to Sophia. Michael's expression became complicated. He genuinely loved Sophia, but this sudden revelation began to shake his thoughts about marriage. Michael, what should I do? Sophia clung to him crying. I don't know either. Give me some time. Michael's cold response hurt Sophia even more deeply. Not only had her identity collapsed, but she was about to be abandoned by the person she loved. Meanwhile, Rachel watched this scene with complex feelings. She was confronted with the ironic reality that she, who had felt inferior to her sister for years and had been looked down upon by her family, was actually the only real daughter. Uncle Tom stood up. Wait a minute. If this is true, what happens to the inheritance issue? Who will inherit Robert's assets? This comment made the atmosphere in the venue even more hostile. Financial interests had become involved. Cousin Jennifer said sharply, then what was all our special treatment of Sophia for? Does this mean Rachel was the real heir all along? Rachel stood up. She felt she needed to calm this chaos. Everyone, please be quiet. This is not the time to talk about money. Sophia is the one suffering the most right now. However, Margaret suddenly began crying loudly. It's my fault. It's all my fault. I never thought a mistake from my youth would come to light like this. Robert approached his wife. Margaret, that's enough. We can't take back the past. What's important is what we do from now on. Sophia sat down on the floor still wearing her wedding dress. The fact that the life she had believed in for 30 years was a lie was too heavy for her. Who am I? What is my identity? Ethan returned to his mother's side and took Rachel's hand with his small one. Mom, I did the right thing, didn't I? Rachel looked at her son. The truth had certainly been revealed, but the price was too high. The family bonds were completely broken, and Sophia's life had fallen into chaos. Ethan, you were brave. But things are going to be difficult from now on. The wedding guests watched this family drama, some with interest, some with displeasure. The glamorous wedding reception would be etched in everyone's memory as an unforgettable nightmare. Michael's father approached his son. Michael, perhaps this marriage should be reconsidered? 3 months had passed since then. As autumn winds began to blow through the streets of Chicago, the Miller family members were each facing new realities. Sophia and Michael's marriage was called off that very day. Michael's family opposed the marriage, saying it would tarnish the family line, and Michael himself was unable to make calm judgments in the confusion. Sophia was currently fighting identity crisis with a psychological counselor. After 30 years of believing in her life, its collapse made finding a new self not easy. On the other hand, procedures for inheriting Richard Harrison's estate were being processed. DNA retesting officially confirmed that Sophia was his real daughter, and she would inherit a considerable amount. Ironically, she became financially wealthier than when she was looked down upon by her family, but Sophia suffered from an emptiness in her heart that money couldn't fill. The relationship between Robert and Margaret had also changed significantly. Now that 30 years of lies had been revealed, the two had begun divorce proceedings. However, they didn't completely hate each other and were quietly preparing for separation while acknowledging each other's mistakes. Margaret couldn't bear the stares from relatives and friends and decided to leave Chicago. Rachel's life had changed dramatically in these 3 months. Her work at Old Town Grill was recognized, and she was promoted to restaurant manager. Her salary increased significantly, bringing comfort to her and Ethan's life. Most importantly, being freed from her family's contemptuous stares allowed her to regain her original confidence. One autumn afternoon, Sophia visited Rachel's apartment. Her sister, whom she hadn't seen in 3 months, had lost her former arrogance and wore an exhausted expression. "Sister, I want to talk," Sophia said in a small voice. The two had a long conversation over coffee in the kitchen. Sophia offered a heartfelt apology. "I've done terrible things until now. Looking down on you, making fun of you. But whether we're blood related or not, we're sisters, right?" Rachel took her sister's hand. "Of course, Sophia. Blood doesn't matter. What's important is that we grew up together. But I hurt you at that wedding. Such terrible things. That's in the past. What's important is what we do from now on." When Ethan came home from school, Sophia bowed deeply to her nephew. "Ethan, thank you for having the courage that day. If it weren't for you, I might have lived in lies forever." Ethan answered with a mature expression. "Aunt Sophia, knowing the truth is painful, but it's much better than lies." That night, the three shared dinner together. The simple but warm meal became a catalyst for gradually restoring the family bonds that had been lost for so long. Sophia had decided to use part of her inherited fortune to establish a foundation supporting people in need. She planned to focus particularly on supporting single mothers and economically struggling families. "I want to help women who are working hard alone like you, sister," Sophia said tearfully. Rachel felt proud seeing her sister's growth. Her arrogant sister had changed into a compassionate woman through trials. A few weeks later, Robert visited Rachel's apartment. He apologized to his daughter for years of misunderstanding. "Rachel, I didn't properly value you. You were the one with true strength. Dad, I don't hold a grudge. Everyone makes mistakes." Father and daughter could finally open their hearts and talk. Now that it was clear they were blood related, their relationship could make a new start. On Christmas night, Sophia and Robert gathered at Rachel and Ethan's small apartment. Margaret had started a new life with her sister in California, but they all called and talked together. "I hope we can all spend time together next year," Margaret's voice came through the phone. As Ethan blew out the candles, he said, "We've become a real family. A family bound not by blood, but by love." Rachel looked around at her son, sister, and father. Their relationships were indeed not determined by blood alone. They were all learning that caring for and supporting each other was what created true family bonds. The chaos that began with that shocking wedding had ultimately brought deeper understanding and love to the entire family. Truth is sometimes cruel, but But when overcome, it creates stronger bonds. This is what the Miller family members learned firsthand.